The Rock is back. Not just appearing, but actively aligning himself with Randy Orton and Pat Mcafee in what could be the most significant power move WWE has seen in years. Meanwhile, Triple H's creative decisions are systematically dismantling two of the most dominant forces in professional wrestling, and Cody Rhodes is standing directly in the path of a corporate power struggle that could reshape the entire landscape of WWE. This is the story that connects all the pieces, and we're breaking down how these seemingly separate moments are actually part of one massive narrative that will define everything moving forward. Welcome back to WWE Express. Let's start with The Rock's involvement because this is the element that changes everything. The Rock is not a man who does things casually. Every appearance, every alignment, every public statement is calculated for maximum impact. When he steps into the Randy Orton and Pat Mcafee sphere, he's not just making a guest appearance, he's positioning himself as part of a faction that's challenging the current power structure. Randy Orton has evolved into something far more complex than the cocky superstar he started as. He's become a veteran presence who commands respect through his understanding of the game. Pat Mcafee brought something completely different to WWE, a charisma and an unpredictability that's absolutely captivating. Now add The Rock into that dynamic, and you're looking at a trio that has the star power, the credibility, and the entertainment value to move the needle in massive ways. The significance of this alignment goes beyond simple entertainment value. The Rock represents a bridge between the traditional era of wrestling and the modern landscape. His involvement signals that something bigger is happening, something that demands a presence of that magnitude. When you're bringing back a figure of The Rock's stature and pairing him with Orton and Mcafee, you're essentially declaring that this storyline matters on a level that transcends typical wrestling angles. The Rock has a history with WWE that's legendary, and anytime he appears, the entire trajectory of the company shifts. This moment is no exception. Now let's talk about Triple H's creative decisions regarding Femi and Brock Lesnar because this is where things get genuinely fascinating from a storytelling perspective. Femi arrived in WWE with an incredible amount of momentum. He's physically dominant, he carries himself with a presence that's genuinely imposing, and he represents a new generation of wrestlers capable of carrying major storylines. Brock Lesnar is Brock Lesnar. He's a once-in-a-generation athlete whose mere presence in a segment elevates everything around him. Yet Triple H's creative direction seems to be deliberately positioning both of these forces in situations where their dominance is being systematically undermined. Think about the angles they've been placed in, the opponents they've faced, and the outcomes that have been booked. There's a pattern here that suggests a very deliberate creative narrative. The argument that Triple H is burying these talents depends on understanding what burial actually means in wrestling terminology. It's not just about losing matches, it's about being placed in positions where your character loses credibility, where your momentum dissipates, where the audience stops believing in your ability to be a top-tier player. For Femi, this could mean being positioned as a dominant force without ever getting the opportunity to truly capture that moment when the audience transitions from respecting his physicality to genuinely believing he's a main event player. For Brock, it could mean using his name value for angles without ever giving him the kind of match or storyline that makes people believe he's still the ultimate force in wrestling. This is subtle work, but it's devastatingly effective if that's actually what's happening. Here's where the genius of professional wrestling narrative comes in. What if Triple H's decisions regarding Femi and Brock Lesnar are actually deliberate? What if they're being systematically positioned in specific ways not because they're being buried, but because they're being set up for something massive? Wrestling storytelling often operates on the principle that the most dominant forces must be brought down before they can rise to their ultimate status. If you're telling a story where either Femi or Brock Lesnar eventually challenges for the main event championship, you need the audience to believe they've been tested, they've overcome adversity, and they've earned their position through character development rather than just physical dominance. The way Triple H has been booking them might actually be laying the groundwork for something extraordinary down the line. But there's another layer to this that connects directly to The Rock's involvement with Orton and Mcafee. What if these storylines aren't separate? What if the way Femi and Brock Lesnar have been handled is actually part of a larger narrative about power, control, and the hierarchy of WWE? The Rock, Orton, and Mcafee represent a faction that's challenging something, and that challenge might specifically involve how talent is being treated, how creative decisions are being made, and who actually controls WWE's future direction. That would make Femi and Brock Lesnar potential allies or opponents in a much larger conflict that's still developing. Now we get to Cody Rhodes versus TKO. And this is where the real drama intersects with legitimate corporate reality. Cody Rhodes has positioned himself as the ultimate representation of WWE's aspirations. He's the Americana hero, the generational talent, the person who represents what WWE claims to be about. But TKO, the corporate entity, operates on completely different principles. TKO cares about profit margins, investor returns, and strategic positioning. Cody Rhodes cares about wrestling, about legacy, about the art form itself. When those two forces come into conflict, you're looking at a genuine clash of ideologies that can't be resolved through a simple match or a storyline conclusion. What makes the Cody vs TKO dynamic absolutely fascinating is that it's probably both worked and legitimate simultaneously. In professional wrestling, this kind of blurred reality is not unusual. Cody's character, his positioning, his entire narrative in WWE has been about standing against corporate interests and fighting for what wrestling actually means. If TKO is now his actual opponent in storyline terms, that creates a completely new paradigm for what his character can accomplish. He's not fighting another wrestler, he's fighting the system itself. That's incredibly powerful storytelling. The connection between these three major elements becomes clear when you understand that they're all addressing the same central question: who actually controls WWE's present and future? The Rock, Orton, and Mcafee represent one answer to that question. They represent star power, veteran presence, and a faction that can't be ignored. Triple H's creative direction regarding Femi and Brock Lesnar represents another answer. It's about control through narrative, through deciding whose moment is now and whose moment is later. Cody Rhodes vs TKO represents the third element. It's about the fundamental question of whether creative artistry or corporate interest gets to dictate WWE's trajectory. What's genuinely extraordinary about this moment is that all three of these narrative threads can coexist and actually strengthen each other. The Rock's involvement with Orton and Mcafee gains additional complexity if it's somehow connected to how Femi and Brock Lesnar have been booked. The way those two have been handled becomes more meaningful if it's part of a larger power struggle that includes Cody Rhodes standing against TKO itself. Every layer adds depth to the other layers, creating a narrative ecosystem where everything matters and everything connects. The wrestling audience is capable of following incredibly complex stories when they're told with consistency and care. We're not just looking for heroes and villains, we're looking for character development, for motivation that makes sense, for stakes that feel genuine. This convergence of The Rock's involvement, Triple H's creative decisions, and Cody's conflict with TKO provides all of that. It gives us figures we believe in, conflicts we genuinely care about, and outcomes that feel unpredictable because we're not entirely sure who's working with whom or what anyone's ultimate goal actually is. The momentum building toward WrestleMania and beyond is absolutely palpable when you step back and look at the totality of what WWE is building. These aren't random angles scattered throughout programming. They're coordinated narrative choices that are slowly but deliberately creating a situation where multiple storylines converge. The audience is being positioned to care about outcomes at the deepest level because the questions being asked are fundamental ones about power, legacy, and what professional wrestling actually means. For complete analysis of how these storylines are developing, how they're likely to converge, and what it all means for the future of professional wrestling, you need WWE Express. We dive deep into the character psychology, the narrative complexity, and the genuine wrestling analysis that goes beyond surface-level commentary. Subscribe to WWE Express now, because the story that's being told right now is something special, and you're going to want to follow every single moment of how it develops.